September 29, 1833. The Grand Royal Palace of Madrid, a place usually bustling with life, was eerily quiet, draped in a silence that felt like death itself. Inside the lavish royal chambers, a 48-year-old man lay dying in his bed. His body, once strong, was now a wreck, ravaged by a terrible venereal disease, a nasty illness he'd caught during his countless adventures with women. This man was Ferdinand VII, the King of Spain, and he was dying in the most humiliating way imaginable for a monarch. He was being consumed by syphilis, a direct result of a lifetime dedicated to the most messed up pleasures. His painful groans echoed through the long palace hallways, a chilling sound that doctors tried desperately to muffle as they attempted to treat the nasty ulcers that covered his body. The irony was incredibly cruel. The man who had always proudly declared himself the defender of Catholic morality and Spanish tradition was now being eaten alive from the inside by the consequences of his own completely out-of-control desires. But how did Ferdinand VII become known as the most perverse and hated king in all of Spanish history? To really understand the moral collapse of this ruler, we have to go all the way back to the very beginning of his life and uncover the dark, ugly secrets that would forever leave a stain on the Spanish royal family. Ferdinand was born on October 14, 1784, in a Spain that was still considered one of Europe's major powers. He was the son of King Charles IV and Queen Maria Luisa of Parma. He grew up in a palace environment that was incredibly corrupt, where sexual cheating and betrayals were more common than even royal meetings. His mother, Queen Maria Luisa, was famous for having many lovers, including the well-known Manuel Godoy, who practically ran Spain because of how much influence he had over the royal family. From a very young age, Ferdinand showed a truly disturbing personality. By the time he was 10 years old, he already displayed clear signs of extreme cruelty towards animals and the servants who waited on him. Stories from people at the time describe how he would torture cats just for fun and force servants into humiliating acts purely for his own amusement. His tutors, deeply worried by his behavior, tried to correct him, but they were consistently fired or moved to different positions whenever they dared to go against the young prince's wishes. Ferdinand's education was a complete disaster. Unlike other European princes who received strict intellectual training, he showed absolutely no interest in anything except satisfying his most basic urges. He hated his studies, had no respect for art and literature, and showed shocking ignorance about important matters of state. His only real passion was spying on the private lives of people at court through tiny holes he ordered to be made in the walls of the palace rooms. In 1802, at the age of 18, Ferdinand married his cousin, Maria Antonia of Naples. The marriage was supposed to make him more civilized, more refined, but it had the exact opposite effect. Secret reports from inside the court reveal that Ferdinand subjected his young wife to humiliating and degrading sexual practices, things no one should ever have to endure. Maria Antonia, who was an educated and religious princess, was completely traumatized by her husband's abuse. She started living almost like a hermit, avoiding her husband's company as much as humanly possible. The situation became dramatically worse when Ferdinand discovered he could use his position as prince to force women at court to do his bidding. He began to blackmail ladies-in-waiting, threatening to completely ruin their families if they refused to satisfy his perverse desires. He developed a particular obsession with married women, seeing their seduction as a twisted way to gain power over their husbands. Many noblemen were forced to quietly accept the dishonor of their wives, just to keep their important positions at court. Persistent rumors suggested that she had either been poisoned or simply died of a broken heart due to her husband's constant, relentless abuse. Ferdinand showed complete indifference to his wife's death, cynically commenting that he was now free to seek more interesting pleasures. The invasion of Spain by Napoleon's forces in 1808 should have been a moment for national unity, a time for everyone to come together. But Ferdinand saw the crisis as nothing more than an opportunity to advance his own selfish interests. During the Aranjuez Mutiny, which forced his father, Charles IV, to step down from the throne, Ferdinand displayed incredible cowardice. Instead of leading the resistance against the French invaders, he preferred to negotiate secretly with Napoleon, offering to hand over Spain in exchange for personal guarantees for his own safety and comfort. The meeting in Bayonne between Ferdinand and Napoleon truly revealed the real nature of the future Spanish king. French witnesses described Ferdinand as a despicable man who humbly begged the French emperor and offered any concession imaginable just to maintain his personal privileges. Napoleon, who was used to dealing with weak and spineless kings, was still genuinely impressed by Ferdinand's truly base character, later commenting that he had never known anyone so vile who occupied a throne. During his forced exile at the castle of Valence, Ferdinand lived years of unimaginable luxury and idleness, all at Napoleon's expense. Instead of making plans for his country's liberation, he dedicated himself entirely to carnal pleasures. He corrupted the French servants, organized wild parties orgies with other Spanish exiles, and contracted his first venereal disease from a local prostitute. Letters intercepted by French spies clearly showed his constant requests for female entertainment and his total indifference to the suffering of the Spanish people back home. Ferdinand's return to Spain in 1814 should have marked the start of a brand new, positive era for the country. Instead, it brought only the restoration of tyranny and extreme moral decay. One of his very first actions was to bring back the Inquisition, not because of any deep religious belief, but because the inquisitorial tribunals gave him absolute power to persecute his enemies and to blackmail powerful families. He would use accusations of heresy to force women to submit to his desires, promising forgiveness in exchange for sexual favors. His second marriage in 1816 to Isabel of Braganza was even more sordid and disturbing than the first. Isabel, a Portuguese princess who was only 19 years old, was quite literally sold by her family to solidify a political alliance. Ferdinand, now 32 years old and already clearly marked by his debauchery, subjected his young wife to even worse abuse than what he had inflicted on his first wife. The Spanish court became a den of corruption under Ferdinand VII. He formally established a system of royal favors, where important public positions were granted only to men who were willing to offer their wives or daughters for the king's pleasure. Ministers were chosen not for their skills or competence, but for the beauty of their female family members. The king maintained an informal harem right within the palace itself, with women who were officially ladies-in-waiting, but who served exclusively to satisfy his endless lust. Ferdinand's sexual practices were of a perversity that genuinely shocked even the relatively relaxed moral standards of that era. Secret court documents, discovered centuries later, reveal his disturbing obsession with humiliating rituals and sadistic practices. He forced his victims into incredibly degrading acts while being watched by other courtiers, turning private intimacy into a public spectacle for his own sick amusement. The situation reached its absolute lowest point with the death of Isabel of Braganza in 1818. Like his first wife, Isabel died young and under highly suspicious circumstances. Doctors reported that she showed clear signs of severe physical trauma and deep depression, Her last confessor, the priest she spoke to before she died, revealed years later that she had expressed a desperate desire to die, simply to escape the unspeakable torment she suffered at her husband's hands. Ferdinand, once again, showed chilling indifference to his wife's death, marrying for the third time just a few months later. Maria Josepha Amalia of Saxony, his new victim, was only 20 years old when she was delivered to the depraved king. This marriage lasted only 2 years before she too died under mysterious conditions, further increasing suspicions that Ferdinand was literally killing his wives through physical and psychological abuse. During the 1820s, Ferdinand reached the absolute peak of his depravity. He simultaneously maintained dozens of mistresses, including nuns whom he forced to break their sacred vows through blackmail and threats. He developed a particular obsession with virgins, offering generous rewards to those who brought him inexperienced young women. Desperate families, facing absolute misery, would sometimes sell their daughters to the king, preferring that dishonor to complete ruin. Spain's political situation deteriorated rapidly and alarmingly under his reign. While Ferdinand indulged in his vices, the vast Spanish Empire began to crumble. American colonies declared independence one after another, the economy completely collapsed, and Spanish society plunged into chaos. The king, however, remained completely oblivious to these massive national problems, concerned only with satisfying his increasingly extreme and bizarre appetites. His fourth and final marriage in 1829 to Maria Cristina of Bourbon-Two Sicilies was a last, desperate act to produce an heir to the throne. Maria Cristina, at 23 years old, was the only wife who managed to survive Ferdinand. But this was mainly due to the fact that he was already gravely ill when they married. Syphilis, contracted in one of his many adventures with prostitutes, had begun affecting his brain and significantly diminishing his capacity to cause harm. Ferdinand's final years were a prolonged, agonizing period. The venereal disease slowly but surely consumed his body, causing repugnant ulcers, constant excruciating pain, and progressive mental deterioration. His doctors, despite all their desperate efforts, could not hide the shameful nature of his condition. The court whispered endlessly about the king's deplorable state, how he had become a truly pathetic spectacle of physical and moral decomposition. At the end of September 1833, Ferdinand VII lay dying in his chambers, abandoned by almost everyone. His former victims had either died or fled. His courtiers avoided him due to the nauseating smell of his wounds, and even his doctors attended to him only out of professional obligation, not care. The man who once terrorized defenseless women was now utterly defenseless himself, consumed by the very depraved choices he had made throughout his life. Death finally came on September 29th, ending one of the most shameful reigns in all of European history. Ferdinand VII died exactly as he had lived, in a sordid and despicable manner. There were no sincere tears at his funeral, only the profound relief of a nation that finally found itself free of its cruel tormentor. His only legitimate daughter, the future Isabel II, inherited a kingdom in ruins and a crown forever stained by her father's utter depravity. The legacy of Ferdinand VII is undeniably one of the darkest in the history of the Spanish monarchy. During his 20 years of effective reign, he transformed Spain from what was once a great power into a backward and universally despised country. His intense obsession with carnal pleasures cost the nation its dignity, its vast colonies, and its once proud position on the world stage. More than that, he established a terrible precedent of how absolute power can completely corrupt a human being, turning them into something monstrous. Today, more than 2 centuries later, Ferdinand VII is remembered not as a king who ruled, but as a predator who shamefully used the crown to satisfy the lowest, most base impulses of human nature. His story serves as a dark and powerful reminder that not even royal blood can protect someone from the horrifying consequences of a life dedicated solely to vice and cruelty. The most perverted king in Spanish history died as he deserved, alone, sick, and despised by all who knew him.